today's video, my disembodied hands are going to show you how to do a waistband for many of the Eli Monsters dresses that have a waistband instead of a bodice meeting the skirt directly. If there's a waistband, this is how we do it most of the time. The example I'm going to show you is for our newest Oud pinafore, but the apple stroop and the pindicasse also use the same type of waistband construction, so I will try to show you what changes there are because the backs are a little different, but essentially the technique is totally the same. You start with your main print of your waistband and then your lining, and what the secret to this is, you will press the lower side. This is a non-directional print, so it didn't matter which side I pressed, but if you have a directional print that you want right side up, make sure that you press up on the wrong side, the lower edge, and that's 3/8 of an inch or a centimeter, depending on if you use imperial or metric measurements. And so I said that I was using the Oud pattern, the Oud pinafore, and this one has open sides, so when it's laid, you know, when the bodice is the right way, the sides are open, and then the back will have a button placket going down the middle. Whereas the apple stroop or the pindicasse have closed sides, but then the back in the middle is open, and so the waistband will get sewn to the waistband instead of to the bodice. And I'll show you the difference there when that comes up. So what you want to do is take your main print, and I'm going to say that this is the top. I like the little bit extra at the top. You want to find the center, and I just do that by finger pressing and making kind of a little press mark right in the center right there. I can see my fold, and then taking the bodice, finding the center of the front of the bodice. And sometimes you don't need to do this on certain patterns because you will have side seams where you'll just line up the side seams. But this one, there is no side seam. It's just one piece for the waistband instead of a front and two backs. So I've pressed the front center, and I want to line those up just like that. So now my center marks, or my little center folds I've made, meet, and then you could find the center for your lining, or you could just line it up because the lining and the main piece are the same width, but I just made my little fold. And so now the tops of the waistband are lined up with the bottom of the bodice. And if you had sides, let's say you were making the apple stroop, you would just keep it going along your back bodice pieces. But this has an open side, so right now I'm going to pin this. Now our front bodice piece is pinned into place, and then we want to maneuver our back bodice piece. We'll fold back the lining, and we want to line it up that so we have our seam allowance left, so 3/8 of an inch or a centimeter. Center that for you. and then we will just fold our lining back, and we'll pin this. And we'll repeat it for the other side. And be sure to leave that 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance at the edge. We'll fold back our lining and we'll pin. And so this is what it looks like. So you have the lining, the bodice, and the main print, and we will sew along this line, this bottom edge, all along it, the whole width, and you'll do that with an open back or open sides, or, you know, let's say in the future I design something with a waistband that has closed sides and a closed back. It's all the same, it doesn't matter. So we'll go ahead and sew that. Okay, so we sewed the seam, and so you'll see that the lining and the main print of the waistband are floating free at the bottom edges. And so now the next step is to attach the gathered skirt to this edge, to the bottom edge of your waistband. I recommend pressing this down now just because it makes things a little easier. Later on you do want to press as you go, so I will press and then I will attach my gathered skirt. Okay, it's a little hard to tell in the video, but I have pinned, oops, should pin one more spot right here. I've pinned the gathered skirt to the main print of the waistband, to the bottom edge, and the lining is hanging free. So in the back, especially for a pattern with a button placket, if you have an open back where the waistband just meets and then you have the open back above, you want your skirt to be the usual 3/8 of an inch, and that's still the case here. So you want to leave that little bit of a seam allowance left. You don't want your gathered skirt going all the way to the edge of the waistband. So you want to leave that seam allowance at each end. So I'm going to sew this seam and then I'll show you how to finish it off. We've sewn the bottom edge of the main print of the waistband to the gathered skirt, and the lining is hanging free. So what we want to do now is what I like to do is I like to just kind of grasp the seam allowance from the top part of the waistband and just kind of tug. That's so, and you can see it on the side without a bodice in between. The two waistbands are now kind of on top of each other. And we want to go around to the side, to the back, this back edge. And you'll notice that the main print, the seam allowance even folds in. And this is the magical part. That first step where I had you iron or press the bottom edge of the lining, this is what makes everything super easy now. So I've already sewn this, but you'll want to sew right along the edge of the bodice. You want to make sure that the bodice is free. It doesn't get caught in this side seam, but we want to go as close to that as possible. So sometimes I like to just kind of fold it out of the way before I sew this straight line. And then you want to clip your corners trim off that little bit of extra. And then when you turn your bodice right side out, and now we'll just turn the whole dress or pinafore inside out, that's so you can see the inside, the lining layer, and why this step is important. Okay, so at this back edge, this is why, you know, again, that very first step of pressing that bottom edge, because now everything lays nice and neat, and then you can just start pinning that bottom edge of that waistband. And so once this is all pinned and I make sure that my corners here are nice and sharp, I'll just go around. I like to do just the bottom edge. Some people like to go all the way around and top stitch the entire waistband, the top and the bottom. Some people, you know, for a really heirloom quality piece, they will do an invisible stitch along just the inside, that's so there's no top stitching showing on the outside. The choice is up to you. My instructions say just the bottom edge because that's what I prefer, but at this point, how you finish the waistband is personal preference, and there's really no right or wrong. I guess the wrong would be if you're, you know, sewing up here somewhere in the middle and then this is hanging loose, and then obviously that's not good technique. But, you know, as far as finishing technique, there's no right or wrong. And so that is how you finish a waistband. Just do that. All of your raw edges are now covered and enclosed inside this waistband, and you get a really nice finished edge.